By the time we realized what was going on, we had made it to Jackson, Mississippi. And what happened was my dad kidnapped us from my mom. I just remember the police coming in with guns, putting us on the floor, telling us to get down.
Kids?
Yes. That's when my life really just took a turn after all that.
Yeah.
I was molested by my uncle. If he could save somebody like me,
Yeah.
love somebody like me,
Yeah.
I didn't know love until I knew Jesus.
Come on.
He cleaned me up. My name is Nakita Haralson. I was born in La Plaza, Louisiana, but raised in Jackson, Mississippi. From Jackson, just kind of all over, back and forth, and was finally stable in Pascagoula, Mississippi, but now living in D'Iberville. I have 4 children. I have 2 boys, 2 girls, and I've been married, it'll be 11 years, September 24th. Growing up in La Plaza, my mom and dad, they were married. My dad was a drug dealer. Originally, my mama wasn't on drugs, but she became a drug addict. To me, I had I would say a normal childhood as possible. What was normal to me as in growing up as a drug dealer's daughter and my mom being on drugs, I would say that it was a constant on the go thing. It wasn't really stable. Eventually my mom and my dad went their separate ways. She took us, my dad, he went to Jackson. My mom took us to wherever she took us to. I can't remember as being that young, but I remember being with my mom for the most part, and I would call my dad all the time, telling him that my mom was leaving us in the house by ourselves, and I wanted him to come get me. The way that he came to get me was not the way that I thought he was, gonna come get me. He said he was coming down to visit and for Christmas and take us Christmas shopping. And so I believe I was about 6 or 7 around this time. He took us Christmas shopping, and after taking us Christmas shopping, he took us to a convenience store. And he was like, told my mom to go in and to get us something, and we couldn't go out with her. So about time he came, she was getting ready to walk back outside the door. We seen her coming out. He had then threw my oldest sister out the car with the makeup kit he had bought her. And I remember him driving off, and it was him and my uncle. And I remember me and my brother standing in the window crying for our mom. And at this point, he was hitting the highway. At first, we really didn't know what was going on. We just kept saying, we want my mom. I want my mom, I want my mom. And by the time we realized what was going on, we had made it to Jackson, Mississippi. And what happened was my dad kidnapped us from my mom.
Wow. Because
he was tired of us being there. My mom was on drugs, and it was unstable. I mean, we would always say, when we go home. He was like, you gonna go. But eventually we realized we was not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so my dad, he spent like 24 hours in jail, and they let him out for kidnapping. And so when it comes to me growing up, remembering my childhood, that's where it started. I was around 6 or 7 when this happened. My mom eventually tried to come to court. Well, they did go to court, but she didn't have any lawyers. She didn't. Basically, my dad had money. She didn't. So she lost the case. My dad got full custody of us because she wasn't stable. But after that, my mom didn't try to come back and get us. I actually didn't see her again until I was about 9. And at this point, she wanted us to come spend a night with her. My dad was going to let us, but she told me that was the day she was going to take us back. Because my mom, like, she hasn't been like a person that's just stayed on drugs consistently. She's like been up and down, up and down. And so, but my dad called back and was like, no, y'all can't go. So that day, my mom told us that when she was actually going to take us back when we were 9. But to be honest, I would rather have stayed with my dad, because when I did stay with my dad, you know, at that age, I didn't even know how to count to 100 or anything. Like, I didn't know nothing.
Yeah.
I would rather have been with my dad, even though I missed my mom, but the situation was unstable. And being with my dad, you know, as we, you know, time went on, we got older, he was still a drug dealer, but he was a professional saute cook at a restaurant as well.
Okay.
So, you know, we were pretty stable, but then as he picked back up in the game, you know, stuff just start wavering, and he didn't really pay as much attention as he needed to do. You know, he needed to pay attention to us. But eventually, like, we had to leave from that house. We were staying around a corner. So even it became unstable with my dad, because it was no longer like, let me focus on what my kids are doing, how my kids are doing. It was more like, I'm back in this gang and I'm just giving them money, doing what they're doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
At this point, I believe we were staying around the corner at another lady's house, which she had a daughter. She was on drugs, but you couldn't tell she was on drugs. Like, she took care of her kids. So even though we had a roof over our head, it was still no longer a place that we could just lay our head,
Yeah.
if you understand what I'm saying. And so eventually, one day that place got raided, our house, and the house we were around the corner it got raided. I just remember the police coming in with guns, putting us on the floor, telling us to get down.
Kids?
Yes, me, her daughter, my brother. They were around the corner. I didn't know this until after they didn't get my dad, because my dad had just drove off. Remember talking to him, and he had just drove off before they raided the house. Going with my dad was great, you know, because we were in a more stable place. He had money, you know, I had an education. I wasn't, as I call myself, stupid anymore, because I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
But eventually it became unstable. He would like let us every now and then talk to my mom. I had a stepmom who we were close at one point, but my dad had ended up going to prison, and because he had sold to an undercover, and she had us, but like she cheated on my dad, and I told my dad. So then she began to be really mean. She went from this bonding with me to making my life hard, if you get what I'm saying. Yeah. So I was kind of back and forth from my grandma to my mom. I didn't really stay with her, and I didn't really stay with my grandma. They were like back and forth, back and forth. But she was real mean. She was no longer like the mom or anything that I didn't have, because I had told on her. When my dad did finally get out and we started back trying to talk to my mom, she would be like, I had a different attitude every time I got off the phone with my mom, and eventually my dad didn't really care if we talked to her or not. And my mom, like I said, she was up and down on drugs, so she really wasn't stable to, hey, how y'all doing? So from that moment of actually seeing her in person at 9, I didn't see her again until I was 15. So when we became like unstable from here to there, we end up kind of going by my aunt's house.
Uh-huh.
And we stayed there for a while. We were still kind of back and forth with my dad, but just not stationary with my dad. I'll never forget, because it was the day before my 9th grade year. And I remember us being with my uncle at his people's house. They were having a card game. But it was getting late, so he took us home to his house, to their house. He asked me that I want to, ride to the store. And when I rode to the store with him, I remember going into this alley down the road from the house. And he parked, and I just remember sitting still. I didn't really know what was finna happen or what was going on, what he was doing.
He took you by yourself?
He took me by myself. And I just remember laying there. And he molested me. Now, I really didn't, dawn on me, okay, this really just happened. I became, just quiet, because before all that had happened, I was a straight AB student. I ran track. I played volleyball in the 8th grade. My dad didn't have any problems out of me. I was considered a good girl,
Yeah.
And because I was considered a good girl, nothing really was out of the ordinary, to my dad. I didn't tell anybody. It was just like it had never happened. But I knew it started changing me. And I'll never forget this one night I heard my dad talking. And he was just bragging on me. And I was just in there crying because I'm like, he don't even know what has happened to me.
Wow.
And he was just telling people how I was in sports. And, they had told me if I kept running the way that I was, by the time I was in high school, I could get a scholarship. So as time went on, like I said, I still never told nobody about what had happened to me. So I'm in the 9th grade, my freshman year, just was molested by my uncle the day before. And I'm in school.
The freshman in high school?
Mm-hmm. It was the day before school. It was the first day of school in 9th grade.
What age?
14. I was 14.
Okay.
I was never this wild person. I was more like a shy person, not really getting into anything. But then, I linked up with these girls. They said they were going to skip school. And this was months into 9th grade. They said they were going to skip school. And so, but about time it came for us to go, I was the only one that was still willing to leave with somebody that I did not even know. Yeah. They said we were going with them. So, I just still got in the car with the guy, took me to this house, and we were just sitting on the couch. But I remember as we were walking up the stairs, it was 3 other guys sitting there. Now, they actually went to the high school, but I don't know if you ever been in school and they have these kids that's there, but they should have been graduated, yeah. But they're kind of in a different class. This is what those guys were. They were way older.
They're making up for the...
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but they kind of went off to another school as well. They would catch a bus and go to another school as well. And I only know that because after the fact of what I'm about to say. So as we were sitting on the couch, I was talking to the guy, and he was just like, I didn't bring you here to just talk, and I'm just like, okay. So I walked, in the room with them, and I have sex with them. But as I'm putting my clothes back on to go to school, because I've skipped school, the other boys bust in the room. They bust in the room and they start grabbing my clothes, and they was like, you either gonna give it to us or we're gonna make you walk home naked. And you can imagine the agony of, oh my God, my dad is gonna kill me. He find out. But it was when you're going through this stuff at a young age, you're not even it's okay. Just get in trouble. Don't lay here and let this stuff happen to you. But when you're put in those situations like that as a young girl, your mindset is not even thinking straight. You're just thinking, okay, just let it happen, Wow. So one by one, I lay there and I just let each one of them rape me. But the third one, I'll never forget, I just screamed. And I was like, stop, And then when it was over, I put my clothes back on. They drove me to school. And I'll never forget, one of them hung out a condom out the window and was swinging it.
Jesus Christ.
And it was so embarrassing.
Jesus Christ.
And I sat there because school was getting out, but I sat there. I went into the gym and I sat there. And I just sat there. And eventually I got on the bus and I went home. And I didn't tell my daddy then either. But the next day when I went to school, I remember sitting in the office. I don't even know why I was in the office. But I can remember this stuff like it was yesterday. I was sitting there and one of the boys opened the door to the office. His name was Cornbread. He had these goals in his mouth. And he smiled at me. And in that moment, it's like this rush just hit me. And I just went to the principal and I told the principal everything. And they rounded them up. Like I remember them being on the mic, calling them to the office. My grandmother came, my dad came. Then they took me to the hospital, got rape kits on me and stuff like that. I seen a judge. I mean, not a judge. I seen a DA. They got my story. But I remember going home and my dad was so mad at me. He was like, tell me where they stay. Tell me where they stay. And I wouldn't tell him, where they stayed. I don't really remember. I just remember, some of the places of where we went to get there. And he was so angry with me. He just whooped me so bad because I wouldn't tell him how to get to them. Because I didn't want my dad to go to jail, for killing nobody. And so that's when my life really just took a turn after all that. Yeah. I was molested by my uncle in the same year as I was raped by 3 boys that I didn't ask. I continued to go to school, but their sister, one of the boys' sister, was going around the school saying that I wanted it. This is what I wanted. Her brother, they didn't rape me. I'm a flipper. Just calling me all out my name.
Did they go to jail?
They did go to jail. They did go to jail, but what happened was, that's what I'm about to tell you now. I ended up getting into a fight with her that day, and I hit the principal in the face doing it. They expelled me because of how the fight was, and I wasn't stopping. I got away from them, went back after her, and just stuff like that. I started running away. I didn't stay stable enough to go to court because at this point, mentally, I'm just all over the place. Yeah. My dad don't even know the root cause of what happened to me in the beginning. He don't even know that my uncle has molested me.
You still haven't told him?
He didn't know until I was 17. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going. I mean, it was just bad. Like, it was nothing he could do with me. I'm just running. And I mean, I did this for a long time. Like, I went back to school. I went to alternative school, but then I would still leave, like running away. I just couldn't mentally stay stable enough to even go to school. And so I just kept running away. One day my dad called me. Well, before this time he called me, I remember his friend coming in these apartments and he was like talking to me. And I remember him trying to grab my hand. And as he was trying to grab my hand, I seen my dad Lincoln pulling in. And when I tell you I was mentally like just gone at a young age, not even focusing on danger or anything, I was just thinking about getting away. I struck out running and ran up these stairs and I kicked these people's door in and I jumped out of this window. I'm talking about if you put another a height to this in a window, I remember jumping out of the window. Now, I didn't even know these people's door I had kicked in just to get away from my dad. And I remember hitting the ground and my knee hit my face and I had like this bruise right here. And I was gone for like a week after that. And then I remember waking up to my dad picking me up, telling me my running days are over. And he called the police on me. By this time, I was 15. That's how, like, it just never ended.
Yeah.
So when it comes to did they ever get convicted, no. Because I never stayed stable to even go through the process to go to court. It's like I just didn't care no more. I just was gone. And so once the police got there, they asked my dad what he wanted to do. And my dad was like, I'll just take her home. I remember my dad sitting on the bed just like you're looking at me now. And he was crying. He said, "What do you want from me? What do you want me to do?" And I said, "I just want to go to my mom." I didn't care about his tears. I was so cold in the inside. I didn't even care how heartbroken he was. All the stuff that I had took my dad through. And he let me go. But I wish he did let me go. I wish he would have, dug deeper, try to see if he could get me a therapist or some help, to see what was going on with me. But I really can't fault him for that because he didn't know what to do with me. I was driving him crazy. He didn't know what to do with me no more. He didn't want me to get killed out here. He had told me he had 2 insurance policies on me. So at least if I want to keep running away, and he'll end up getting paid. That's just how he started talking to me because it was just that bad, When he asked me what I wanted to do, I said, I just want to go to my mom. And that's when he let me leave and go stay with my mom. But even then, when I made it to my mom, she trying to run me. I'm already out here. There's nothing you can do with me. You can't tell me how to be no woman. You can't teach me nothing, because I already feel like I'm grown, You don't know what I've been through. You don't know all the stuff I had to endure. But it's just stuff that I was hovering in, not telling it all, And so it just drove me. And so when I made it to her, I already felt like I was grown.
And you still haven't revealed to anybody about your uncle?
No, when I was 17, I told which is my oldest daughter's dad. Now, I didn't have her till I was 18, but he was the guy I was talking to. Because, mind you, when I say I was back and forth, if I didn't like a situation, I left. If I didn't like this, I left. Like, I didn't stay with my mom. Like, I was on the go. I tried to go back to school and left school. My grandma trying to tell me what to wear. I'm like, my dad bought this. This is what I'm going to put on. I mean, just small stuff. She hits me across my head with a plate one morning because I wanted to wear these certain pants she didn't want me to put on. I left school, came back to the house, packed all my clothes, and went to my friends around the corner and left in the middle of the night and went all the way to Hammond, Louisiana. I was just on the go. I never stayed still. So from there, it was just back and forth from Jackson to New Orleans to Louisiana, like this.
Right.
And so when I did come back down to Jackson, I met my daughter's father. And so the reason how I ended up telling him was because my uncle came to me and offered me money to have sex with him as if he didn't rape me. Like, he didn't take my virginity, Wow. Like, it was okay for you to ask me something like that because I never told nobody. You thought it was okay, but you don't see the detriment of how my life went from an AB student running track, playing volleyball to it's a disaster. And all everybody could say to me was, she's a problem child, She has the nastiest attitude. She's not going nowhere. You're never going to get hired. Nobody ain't going to want to deal with you. Not knowing all the stuff I was doing, it started from him molesting me.
Yeah.
So
He offered you money?
he offered me money to sleep with him. And I told the guy that I was talking to, and I told him what he had did to me. He was the first person I ever told. And he was like, you really need to tell somebody. You need to tell somebody. And I'm like, no. He was like, you need to tell somebody. And I called my dad, and I told him what happened. He said, his words were, why are you just now saying something? Why are you just now telling us? Why are you waiting so long? And that was it. Everybody just swept it as under the rug as if it never happened. Like, it never happened. All because I waited too long. I mean, I was 14. It still ain't, I don't think it had reached the statute of limitations, but it was just like, oh, well, you know.
Tell your mom?
Yeah, I told my mom about it once, you know, it all had happened. It was over. You know, once I had told about my dad, told my mom, my dad and my grandma and them, and eventually I told my mom, you know. But it wasn't like soon as I got there, hey, my uncle did this to me. No, it wasn't like that.
But everybody's response wasn't a response to vindicate you.
Right. Let's ask him about it. Let's do something about it. It wasn't. It was just like, you waited too long to tell us.
Wow.
Yeah. They're still married to this day, my aunt and my uncle.
No apology. He
never apologized to this day. Ever. He sent me friend requests. My dad passed away 2019. I sung at his funeral. He's actually a pastor. Yeah, he's a pastor. He was a deacon then. But he's a pastor now. He pastors in a church. And I had to forgive him. And it didn't happen. I'm like, I had to forgive him when I finally got in Christ. It didn't happen like at a young age.
Yeah.
Because somebody that you have to see sometimes when you go there, like reaching for a hug at my daddy's funeral as if none of this never happened.
Wow.
You know, it just made me crawl because it's like, even when you sent me a friend request, you could have said, I'm so sorry for what I did to you at that age. Well, he never apologized.
Wow.
He never apologized. And I had recently kind of talked to I had did the video we was just telling you, I seen on TikTok. And I kind of it kind of opened me back up and I pushed myself away from my grandma. Because I have a sister that's 15 that my grandma stays with them. And in my mind, I always was like, you know, they always let her go with him. You know, what if he had done that to her? Or what if it's already happened?
Right.
Because she's battling with suicide and other things and you're saying, oh no, I've asked her and nothing. She said nothing. He didn't do anything to her. Yeah. But she changed, you know? Yeah. And that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But then I veered away from my grandma because I finally opened up and when I finally did call her, I said, the reason why I kind of pushed back because when I made that video, I started just feeling some type of way about nobody never really caring about me telling y'all he molested me. And all she said was, I understand you know, you pushed back and all that, but still she apologized, you know, but it was still never, so why nobody never do nothing, you know? Yeah. So I didn't get justice for him and I didn't get justice for them either. I became this cold-hearted young girl and I did not care about anybody but me. But being that type of person caused the guy that I was talking to, that I was the first person I told that my uncle molested me, he was abusive. So I'm super young dealing with an abusive person that's telling me nobody, see now he knows what I've been through. nobody loves me. They're disowning you, so I became manipulated, as I would call brainwashed, because now it's like, okay, well, I really don't got nowhere to go. I'm unstable. I'm out here, I'm there. I can't, I'm with you now and you love me, You're telling me you love me, but you're beating me.
Right.
I'm 17 by now, dealing with you, and you got my mind just thinking you the only person love me. Wow. Got me sitting in the cars and while you at work, and I'm sitting there not moving with a black eye. Wow. It's like a cycle that never ends when you're going through certain things in your life and you accept things because now you feel like a nobody. You don't feel like you're nothing. Oh, but now somebody finally cares about you because you don't have enough sense to know that this isn't love either, And that's what I dealt with for a while. And what's more vicious and crazy was that my daddy had helped me to get away from him, but I would come back. And I'll never forget, it was March 2nd, and my dad took me to the bus stop after he came and got me from a hotel, because I did end up leaving the guy. But I went to my grandmother's house. It was crazy because they were in these apartments. She stayed in an apartment. He stayed across the way in the same apartment complex. That's how I ended up meeting him.
Okay.
And I ended up leaving him. But then he asked me, could I come outside and talk to him? Well, he took off with me in the car. Took me all the way over a highway somewhere into this hotel. And he would not let me go. He ended up going into the bathroom, and I hurried up and dialed my grandma's number and hung the phone up. The next day I remember my dad, I guess he seen his car, his white Lincoln, and he pulled beside and he was like, you better let my daughter out. Blah, blah, I'm going to kill you, just going. So I ended up being able to get out because he ran in the bathroom and locked himself in. Yeah. So my dad was like, you need to go and don't come back. He put me on the bus, stayed at the bus with me. I came back the next day, which was March 3rd on my birthday. I called my dad and I told him I was here. He said, don't call me. Do not call me until you leave. And I'll never forget, I was laying in the bed with him and he started talking to this girl on the phone. So I got up and I was like, what are you doing? You're being disrespectful. So I got up and I started, putting my clothes on. I went to the mirror trying to fix my hair because I was about to go. And I remember him coming behind me and he pushed my head into the glass. Now you can imagine I went through this with my uncle. Then I turned around and went through this in high school. And then the very person that I actually sleep with, he does it to me all over again. He tried to force me to sleep with him, but I wouldn't. So he held me down. And basically, if I say no, that's still rape. And it was like I went through it all over again with the person that say they love me. But it was like he felt he was in control when he was doing this to me. And I was just yet again laying there crying, asking him to stop because it wasn't a pleasure to me. You were forcing me to do something I didn't want to do. And I was trying to leave. And once you're done, you say, calling me out by my name, telling me to get up, clean up. And I remember striking out the door with a blouse on and some panties. And he ran behind me. And I was screaming for help, just asking somebody to help me. And he pulled me back in the house. And eventually he let me go. He actually took me to the bus stop and I left. And I went back to Louisiana and I went by my mom. My mom was stable, still. Yeah. But I ended up meeting these girls, me and my sister, and, we were trying to get some money. So they would show us some tricks on how to manipulate men without sleeping with men, if you get what I mean. Yeah. But it was very dangerous doing this, cause we were we were we were young, you know. They were in the game, as I would call them. They were actual prostitutes. We didn't know really nothing about the game, about what they were doing.
Yeah.
We just knew, like, we want some money. We're gonna be a part of this. You know, this is how we're gonna do it. So they would, you know, we would be their, how you call it, their partner in crime. They would do what they need to do, but we were, you know, taking pants and running out and people running after us, and, you know, very dangerous game. Like, your head could have got blown off.
Yeah.
You know, you could be in prison for the rest of your life doing stuff like this.
Right.
And that's the type of stuff that I had got into at young age, almost going into 17 years old. And so my life just never stopped. It just never stopped. This is what my life had become a part of. And I wanted money, you know, like, this is the way I'm going to have to get it, you know. But like I said, it just was a lot of back and forthness, and my story's kind of all over, because it happened, like, you know, different scenarios back to back, and I just never stayed stable.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, when I ended up leaving him that last time, going back by my mom a couple weeks later, I had found out I was pregnant with my daughter that's 15.
Uh-huh.
And I called him and I told him I was pregnant, and he told me, he said, come back. I said, I'm not coming back, you know, so you can kill me and the baby. And he said, well, you're not coming back because that's not my baby. Now, the man that has did all this to me, now I'm pregnant with his child. And all I was saying was, I'm going to hate this little girl. You know, not little girl, because I didn't know what it was at the time. I'm going to hate this child, because every time I look at this child, I'm going to see him.
Yeah.
And probably when I was about 5 months, I decided to keep her when I felt her move in my stomach. But me and my older sister stayed into it a lot. My mom put me out. My grandma stayed down the road. I probably was there a couple weeks because she was upset that I couldn't give her no money. This is my mom's mom.
Yeah.
So I'm out on the streets. I ain't got nowhere to go. I went back to Jackson. But I ended up staying in the shelter for teens that were pregnant.
Wow.
And they took me in, and I couldn't use the phone. I couldn't call nobody. I couldn't watch Lifetime. I couldn't nothing. Now, they were really good people. You know, they took care of you. But it was like isolation, you know. But it was not for the bad. It was for the good. But at that time, I didn't take it that way, you know.
Yeah.
They would let me call my dad, but that was it. So I eventually leaving from there too. And then I went back to Hammond, Louisiana, where I eventually had my daughter.
Yeah.
And then after that, my mom ended up leaving Louisiana too, and she moved to Pascagoula, Mississippi. So she was stationed there. I was still in Hammond, Louisiana, where I had my daughter. And the lady I was staying with, she was a friend of the drug dealer I was dealing with. But she was on drugs, and she also cooked the drugs for him. So that wasn't stable either. To, you know, I had my daughter in there.
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving there, going to Pascagoula with my mom, staying with my mom. Again, after all, that's what, like, it's like, you know.
Yeah.
I was there with my mom, with my daughter. You know, everything was going good. I was working. But one day I came home. The lights was off. Water was off. My mom took the fun of drugs. I didn't know my mom was relapsing on drugs.
Wow.
I had a job, and, you know, I was conversating with this other guy by the end. So he made sure the lights and everything got cut on and everything for me and my daughter. And he would make sure I got to work. And life just kind of went from there, you know. After that, I would just really only talk to guys that sold drugs.
Yeah.
It had to be fast money. I did not want to talk to anybody. Like, to me, a guy that worked was a square. You know, it was somebody that I didn't care. They 5 figures. It didn't matter. All I wanted was fast money. It had to be a drug dealer. This is what I wanted. This is all I wanted to deal with, because nothing else can suffice what I need.
Yeah.
You know? So being down there with my daughter, like I said, I worked, but I still would talk to drug dealers. I would have sugar daddies, you know, not necessarily meaning I had to sleep with anybody to get money, you know. But I would get used and I would use them, you know. It was like a return thing, but it was dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you know, go through stuff like this. They become addicted to drugs, alcohol. My addiction was money. And when I say stuff was like an exchange, because sometimes it would be like, I'm not going to sleep with just you for nothing, you know.
Yeah.
Even if I knew you, we were like, you know, no, it was this amount off top, you know, but it was dangerous. I mean, I could have ended up with diseases that I could not get rid of. But in my mental state, I didn't care. All I knew was I want what I want.
Yeah.
I really didn't have a heart that was clinging or to really feel like somebody really loved me, you know. I didn't really know what love was.
Yeah.
Because all my life I felt like I had been damaged by somebody that said they loved me or I thought cared about me, you know. Yeah. So that's the girl that I became, but yet still unstable.
Right. And that's what I can see throughout the whole story of your transformation. What was the moment of things just really brightening up for you?
So I remember being at work. I had got a different job. I had actually 2 jobs. I worked at McDonald's, and I was training to be an assistant manager at a Kangaroo gas station. One day I was in there, and you know, like how bill collectors call you?
Yeah.
They always call, right? But it was just crazy. It was like on this certain day, a bill collector called me and was like hounding me. And I started crying. And I'm like, I'm just so tired. I'm just so tired. I had a beautiful apartment. Everything in my apartment was rented because I didn't care, you know, somebody else paying for it, right? But I remember just breaking down at work, and I was like, I'm so tired. I didn't really have a relationship with God, but I knew of God. And that's why I was just like, I'm just so tired. Just so tired. And I remember this lady walking in, and she had asked me what was wrong. And I was just like, I'm just going through a lot. And she asked me, she was a teacher over at Virginia College at the time, off Pops Ferry, where the college used to be. She was like, have you ever thought about going to school? Have you ever thought about this? Ever thought about that? But I remember after she had left, I told her no. But after she left, I was still crying. Like, I just had an emotional day.
Yeah.
And I remember going home that night. Now, the guy who was my husband now, Shumford, we worked at McDonald's together.
Okay.
he had already given me his number. It was like,
Okay.
call me if you ever want to talk, And at that time, he was like, when I first seen him at McDonald's, he wasn't a guy I could see that was a godly man. He was
Yeah.
like, he still looked like he smoked and, all that stuff. And I showed no interest at all. It was just like, but he had given me his number one day and told me if I ever wanted to talk, you know, call him.
Yeah.
Around this time, it was like I seen him coming into McDonald's with his Bible and stuff like that. So that night I called him and I was just telling him all the stuff that I had been through and the stuff that I was going through. And he said, just turn all the lights off and just begin to call on Jesus.
Jesus.
As I began to call on God and just ask him to help me, I don't want to do this no more. I don't want to live this life anymore like this. I'm just tired. I feel like in that moment, that's when God saved me.
Jesus.
And what's so crazy was after he stayed on the phone with me while I was praying. And after I got done praying, I got back on the phone and started talking to him, and I got a text message. And the text message said, "Are you free tonight? I got 200."
Wow.
And it was so crazy. It's crazy how the enemy works, right? I didn't know at the time, but it was like, you just called on Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So here you go. Let's see, But like I said, I didn't know still. I didn't have that relationship, but God allowed me to not respond to that message. And I ended up going to church that following Sunday with him, with Shumpert. And I was in there, and after Apostle McCoy finished ministering, he came by me and he pointed to me and he began to speak in my life and talk to me about my mom, about how God was going to, heal our relationship. Because I was really angry with her, from the moment she had put me out being pregnant with my daughter.
Yeah.
And he was telling me that God was going to heal my body as well because I was having some issues, some pain in my bottom, my lower area. And I walked out of there and I remember Shumpert, because he was my friend,
Yeah.
He was like, "Was that real? Was he telling the truth?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah."
Wow.
But I still, I ended up going to the club that following weekend. But I remember being in the club, and I remember it was like this mist of fog. And I remember saying to myself, what am I doing here? I left that club, and I didn't look back. And I started going to church. I had given up just everything. It was like he had did a quick work with me. It wasn't like a stalled out thing. Yeah. Like he knew he had to save me, Yeah. I cut family off. I cut everybody off because I no longer spoke the language. I no longer could be on the phone with my mom or my sister asking me questions about how can they get money up out of this guy or how can they do this. I was the person they was asking this stuff. Yeah. That's how deep I was into this, And my life just changed after that. And I didn't club no more. I didn't use guys. I didn't let guys use me. I knew what real love was. Yeah. If he could save somebody like me, love somebody like me.
Yeah.
I didn't know love until I knew Jesus.
Come on. Come on.
He cleaned me up and
Yeah.
he turned me around.
Yeah.
He turned my life around. And I didn't care about what people thought about me anymore because I was new.
Yeah.
So my past, I didn't let my past dictate who I was
Right.
no more. And even though it has still affected me in my adulthood for what happened to me, when it came to my own daughter, getting married and stuff like that, I was so protective of her.
Yeah.
I wouldn't let my husband chastise her or anything, It don't go anywhere. It's like if you don't deal with the eternal stuff
Yeah.
and really get it out, talk about it, you can't go nowhere.
Right.
Because it haunts you forever.
Yeah.
It'll dictate your whole life because you're allowing this stuff to affect you into your adulthood with
Right.
your children because of what has happened to you.
Right.
And you have to maneuver through all that,
That's right.
and it affected my whole marriage because of it,
Yeah.
But I didn't know any better because I didn't have nobody teaching me or showing me these things of how to allow your spouse, your husband to lead, or be the head and let him take care of you and take care of your daughter.
Right.
Because I was still damaged.
Yeah.
Jesus loved me first, but then I had somebody else that loves me too, but I didn't know how to really love in that manner.
Yeah.
It was more of a protect me, myself, and my child.
Yeah. From as we conclude, looking at your story, from everything that you've been through to where you are now, what can people learn from your story?
One, I would tell any young girl or any young boy that if they ever been molested or touched in any kind of way that was uncomfortable, don't shut your mouth. You have to tell somebody. Because if you don't tell somebody, then all that anger and that secret, that it turns into anger, bitterness, frustration, depression, stress, and it all hovers inside of you. And because you don't tell nobody, it's going to affect everything about you in your life. So you have to tell. It don't matter who it is. You got to tell somebody.
Yeah.
You have to tell.
Right.
If I had told, I don't believe my life, I probably wouldn't have skipped school that day.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have happened to me because I would have been getting worked on by getting help from a therapist or somebody from when my uncle molested me.
Right.
So it's important to tell, even if you're not getting molested or you haven't been raped, if you're getting abused, you're in an abusive relationship, verbal abuse, whatever, that could go on with you as a child. It don't necessarily mean you're an adult, but I would tell even to adults that tell somebody.
Yeah.
It's never too late to tell somebody. Don't keep it in.
Right.
Because even though you might think it's too late, you still can be healed.
Yeah.
And I would say the only thing that made me who I am today, out of all the things that I've been through, was Jesus.
Yeah.
He was my deliverance. He was my light.
Yeah.
He was my path to who I am today.
How is he helping you deal with all that to where it can help somebody else that's watching?
The prayer. Prayer has been my peace. That's been my only thing that keeps me from not hating people.
Yeah.
It helps me to forgive the people that hurt me. And it helps me to let go of the stuff that damaged me.
Right.
Continuously, because it's a continued process, on this journey.
Right.
But that's it.
Yeah.
Without him, I couldn't do it.
That's powerful.
That's
good. Just looking at over your whole story,
I'm sorry. I told myself I wasn't gonna cry loud.
No, you fine.
Hard.
You fine. I'm here with you. Just looking at your whole story, just a lot of people don't make it out of certain things like this. A lot of people, it messes them up mentally forever. A lot of people, it just really damages them in a great way.
Yeah.
But like I said, during these interviews, you see people come to church, you see people praise God, you see them serving God, but you don't know their why. You don't know their reason. You don't know the purpose for why somebody is serving God. And I can see that purpose in you. I can see that it's serving a purpose. People that are watching, Sister Nakita is she's on the praise team. And I can see now the passion that you give when you're ministering through song, when you're worshiping, is coming from a place that God has and is delivering you from, has transformed you from. And that is going to bless a whole lot of not just young ladies, but young men, because molestation is not just gender towards just one gender. And so I appreciate you with the courage and the strength of God, obviously, coming in and being willing to share your testimony, because it's going to bless a whole lot of people. It's going to let parents be more aware of how to be cautious with their kids, with family and non-family.
Right.
They say a family that prays together stays together, but it's not all the time.
Right.
Because like you said, your family.
He was a deacon.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be very mindful of how we raise our kids within family, out of family, and just let them know it's okay to be vocal. It's okay to be involved in their life and know what's going on, just to get their understanding, not to put our opinions of how they should voice themselves to us, but allow them to have a voice to speak out and to speak up. So I appreciate you for that, helping us to give insight, to be aware of stuff like this. And so I really appreciate you once again. Take us out with a moment of prayer, if you don't mind.
Lord, Father God, I just thank you for allowing us to come into this room, God. I thank you for everything that has transpired. I thank you for the opportunity, God, that Minister Lacey has allowed me to be here. I thank you, God, for just allowing me to speak my truth. I thank you, Lord, for just not even allowing me to be embarrassed of my testimony and the things that I've been through, to be able to help somebody else. I ask that you bless each and every person that's in this room today. I love you. I adore you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, Sister Nakita Haralson, until next time, be blessed.